Forced adversity.
All right, so yeah, as the title of the stream indicates, saving the best for last, as per usual. Seen this a little bit, you know, this one in particular, but I've seen a couple other similar things. And this is directly in response to Peacemaker, I believe. You know, Peacemaker came out, first 3 episodes. It's very good. It's very entertaining. It's very funny. It's very oddly sincere at times. I think it's some good messages in there. And I think it's a complex thing. It's like, as you were saying about John Cena playing this character, it's an odd character to make, you know, as he's going to be known for this role, right? Like, and it's also the first DCEU official show that's, and so like, but I mean, it's a complex character. He was clearly in the Suicide Squad, was not a great guy, and he's not a great guy even in the 3 episodes, but you're starting to see some nuance and things are happening with him. Not to spoil anything, but yeah,
can I do a very minor spoiler to say in a praise at the same time? Very minor.
Sure. Yeah. So let me just make sure the audience knows that you're about to do a minor spoiler for Peacemaker. So earmuffs, minor. All right.
Minor. I'm just going to say that I am absolutely fascinated with his relationship with his father. That's it. That's all I wanted to say. I think that's going to be a very strong angle, and I like what they went with that.
That's fucking, and Robert Patrick too is fucking awesome.
Oh,
anytime he shows up, I'm happy to see him.
That hair they gave him is wild. It's great.
So this guy says James, and he tagged James Gunn to say this like an ass clown. James Gunn basically acknowledged in the THR podcast that DC is copying Marvel as always. Marvel publishes a comic based on zombies. DC steals the concept. Marvel is well-established female MCU characters. DC realizes this and tries to shoehorn their female characters at this time. That's so stupid. Marvel does shows to expand the MCU. DC copies the concept. Marvel hires legendary actors like Willem Dafoe, Jeff Goldblum, Emma Stone, Scarlett Johansson, etc. DC realizes and casts Robert De Niro, Dwayne Johnson, Brendan Fraser, etc. Oh man, it's so goddamn stupid. I don't even know if I can respond to it. DC is notoriously known for stealing Marvel talent for their own ends, like James Gunn, Jeffrey Wright, Robert Downey Jr., etc.
They mentioned the comics in the beginning, like they said comics. But Marvel publishes a and then it just turned into they're stealing Robert Downey Jr. Like, what the fuck? It's all over the place.
Let me get some water because I'm gonna probably have to go off here.
Go do it. Fix your tie first.
I'm gonna fix my. By the way, fucking dope Moon Knight shirt. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
By the way, Moon Knight. I meant to say this in the news flash. Moon Knight is apparently tentatively scheduled to debut on Disney Plus on March 30th, I believe. So that's exciting.
March Madness.
Okay, so first of all, he did not say this, as James Gunn replied and said, "Oh, nonsense! I never said such a thing." But before we get to more of his response, I want to respond. Me first, James Gunn. God damn it! Who's the real talent around here? No, I'm kidding. So Marvel publishes a comic based on zombies. DC steals the concept. All right. So Marvel Zombies came out in 2007 was when Marvel Zombies came out. And it was just kind of a fun little throwaway thing. And it ended up being super duper successful. And then in 2008 or so, DC did Green Lantern Blackest Night, which is kind of zombies, but not really traditional zombies. It's basically just every character that had died previously in the DC universe was taken over by the Black Lantern Ring power, and they became like just a super zombie, basically. Like they weren't really eating brains or anything. They're only zombies in the loosest sense that they were once dead and now they're undead.
How'd they look visually?
Not, I mean, yeah, they were kind of rotten and shit. We can look at a picture maybe. It's been a while. I mean, I did love that fucking story. I've got, as a matter of fact, got the omnibus back here. Be too difficult to show you images from that though. I mean, they were just superheroes that look like zombies, kind of.
Got it.
But I mean, not even really.
Nah, yeah, maybe just that one guy.
Well, and that's the actually Necron. That's the bad guy of the
Yeah,
whole thing. He's the
yeah.
one with the power to bring people, back from the dead or whatever. So like this Superman, he had died. He got turned into a Black Lantern. He's got a Black Lantern ring. This is not even the same thing. Besides the fact zombies have existed since they've been around in some form or another for a long time. They existed in popular culture since Night of the Living Dead. And what was that? 67,
68.
Yeah.
1968.
So that's that. And then, of course, most recently, DC did a run. Tom Taylor, as a matter of fact, great fucking series called Deceased.
Nice.
Where, it's pretty clever wording, where the character, this basically an alternate DC universe where the anti-life equation gets released and basically kills a bunch of people, turns them all into zombies and shit. But it's nothing like Marvel Zombies. Completely different story. Like the fact that they're kind of undead zombie type creatures, that's the only thing. So that's very reductive and stupid right there. This is where it gets just instantly goes off the rails, and I don't even know how to respond to this. So Marvel has well-established female characters. DC realizes, we have female characters too. What? Look, women exist, guys. Like, I don't know if you know this. There are actually more of them than men. That's crazy. Can you fucking believe it? It's fucking crazy. And it's just I don't know how a human being can formulate this sentence and not their brain not collapse on itself.
Yeah, you need if you're gonna do like a logic train thing, you need to have it be like not only connect the trains, but make sure there's not like a jet, like a freaking supersonic jet is the other like vehicle you're trying to like lock into, because it just goes way out of.
Well, I mean, this also ignores the fact that Marvel and DC have been in direct, friendly competition for 70, 80 years in some cases, right?
Thank God. And thank God for that.
Thank fucking Christ, who I don't believe in that they have been, right? So let's see. It gets really stupid. Marvel does shows to expand the MCU. DC copies okay. All right.
Oh no. Go off, King. Go off, King.
I don't know if this guy's heard of streaming platforms. I don't know if he's heard of the fact that basically since around the time of The Sopranos in the late 90s, early 2000s, then Lost, then Battlestar Galactica, then a whole slew of shows after, we entered what's colloquially known as the golden or even platinum age of television, right? Where long-form serialized television shows became the new thing. Prior to that, the vast majority of TV shows were, one episode, everything kind of resets back to where it was at the end, and then you start over again the next episode. And then, in the early 2000s, shows became serialized. Now, it kind of makes absolute perfect sense for a comic books, which is a serialized medium, one ongoing story for the most part, to enter that as well, especially when Marvel had already done that with films. They revolutionized films by doing that for the first time, at least to that extent. So to just, once again, to reduce it down to DC copied, it's like, no, this is just what the market is doing. This is what media is doing. And so, of course, it makes sense, because here's the thing that all of this ignores. We live in a capitalist society, and every single company that wants to make money, which is every single company, is going to go with whatever the cultural shift is doing. So when the cultural shift is going to streaming television, guess what? Marvel does it. Disney does it. I mean, DC does it. Everybody does it. It's just the hip thing to do.
Another example would be 2016. We had Civil War and BVS during election year. There's like almost like a cultural shift, like we as society, that's what we're interested in. And that's what I said. These companies have people that analyze this shit, that analyze what people want or look for and stuff like they have this down to almost a science. Not quite there yet, but almost to a point where they go by numbers of what they're going to release.
Yeah. Thank you for that pun contribution to the conversation. And believe it or not, it gets dumber. So Marvel hires legendary actors like Willem Dafoe, Jeff Goldblum, Emma Stone, Scarlett Johansson. DC realizes that well-known actors are a good thing to have in your movies and shows. What the fuck, dude? Like, yeah, DC is the first company to ever go, hey guys, you know how some actors are well-known? Maybe we should get those actors instead of ones that people don't know about. What do you think? You think that's a good idea? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. It's a crazy idea. God damn it, it's stupid. And
Marvel gave him the idea to cast Robert De Niro.
Yep. Because they, Marvel cast Willem Dafoe, so clearly Robert De Niro is the same thing. And,
who's going
Jeff
after Al? Who's going after Al? We got Michael Douglas, right? This is a battle of like the
Jeff Goldblum, actors. Dwayne Johnson. That's basically the same thing.
Same thing.
Those are the essential. Can you even tell those guys apart? I can't.
They both ran in a jungle at one point, I guess.
True. Yeah, very iconic. Okay, and then I guess so DC is notoriously known for stealing Marvel talent for their own ends. Stealing them. They steal them.
Middle of the night, DC came in and robbed them.
What do words even mean? What is a word? What is the definition? Who cares anymore? We're in a post-definition world now, guys, where just words mean whatever the fuck we want them to mean. Because actors are not allowed to work on more than one project. They're not allowed to work on a competitive project. Now, look, if Marvel and DC wanted to, I imagine they could make these actors sign exclusive contracts. And maybe on certain cases they might. I don't know. Maybe the details are like Chris Evans. I'm sure they don't want him necessarily going to play Batman or something like that, or they didn't, right? But like, it's so stupid. And for one thing, this ignores
Sweden.
True. This also ignores. Yeah, look, it's a good thing to leave him off the list. But like, look, they stole talent from Marvel. James Gunn? You mean the guy that Marvel or Disney fired?
Stole him.
And they stole him. Okay, makes sense. Jeffrey Wright, who did a voice part on an animated show, stolen. Wait, when did Robert Downey Jr. act in a DC movie? That's just not even. On? This guy's just
a troll. This is a troll.
Robert He's just saying words, man.
Dr. Doolittle in the DC universe?
I guess so. No, I think it's a Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is a DC property.
I don't mind that.
Yeah, it's cool.
That's
It'd be one of the best DC movies for sure.
Yeah.
And then, the reason I even brought it, maybe it is a troll. Maybe it is. It starts to seem like it when he says, so James Gunn says, "Oh, nonsense. I never said any such thing. DC and Marvel have always borrowed from one another. I can't imagine a more daft argument, bringing up zombie comic books while neglecting to mention DC created superheroes," which is true. P.S. Putting big stars in movies is no stroke of genius. No, it's literally just what movies have always done, right? The only reason that any movie doesn't put a big star is because they don't have the money. That's it. I mean, okay, let me take that back. There's probably some small percentage of like, we want unknowns because for whatever reasons. So that exists, sure. Yeah. But okay, then he had the nerve to respond, and this is where I think you might be right. It might be a troll.
He did the
borrowing. The borrowing part is 88.3% true.
Please. Oh, dude, why are you wasting James Gunn? James Gunn has the movie to film, asshole. Why
I think James Gunn. I think James Gunn probably realized at that moment, like, oh fuck, I shouldn't have responded to this guy. What have I done? He was
ignoring Dave Bautista, who had a character question to answer this shit. Like, he's like, fuck.
Yeah, so I'm going back to banging my hot wife and writing cool movies. Why did I do this? I regret this. Yeah, so that's dumb. But I figure that's a good jumping off point actually to talk about, the history of Marvel and DC stealing from each other, right? Because it's a thing people like to say. And I'll be honest. I'll be a little forthcoming with my own history as I don't know if this is toxicity necessarily, but it borders on it, depending on what you do with this perspective. As most people are probably aware, I'm more of a Marvel fan. I have nothing against DC. You're never going to hear me talking shit on DC because I prefer Marvel for the most part. Some of my favorite comic book stories are DC, period, over anything Marvel's done. But it just in terms of volume and like the number of things and characters that I relate to the most, it's Marvel. I've definitely gotten more into DC comics in the last 5 years or so, more than I ever thought I would. So that's cool. But still, I prefer Marvel. But back in like 2010, 11, 12, I wrote for a nerd website, like a comic book movie kind of thing. Just, I was managing editor. I got to just write whatever I wanted. So whenever I had an idea for something, I would just write it. And one of the things that I was much more tribal about my Marvel love back then, right? Like I thought DC kind of sucked. I was like, oh, DC is not as good. I like Marvel because of this. It's like the kind of stuff you see, fanboys saying nowadays. I used to say that kind of stuff. Like justifying my preference as if it's objective or something like that. And so I wrote an article about like the top 10 times that DC ripped off Marvel. And I remember going into it thinking, that I was going to be making DC look really bad for stealing a bunch of stuff from Marvel. And then I started looking into the dates on things. And I realized I was wrong about like half of them. And that, oh, wait, no, this actually came first. DC did this first. Marvel did that first. And then it kind of set me on this path of trying to understand why this happens. Like, why are there characters that are so similar to other characters in the two different publishers, right? Like, and the thing is, you got to get out of that framing of thinking of it like stealing, because you can look at interviews with the original creators of both publishers, the classics, the legends. It was a friendly competition. For one thing, once again, capitalism incentivizes competition. That's just what it does, right? So you want to compete with whoever's doing the best, because if you can compete and do better, and you can offer somebody something similar, it's like, iPhone and Android. Is there really a whole lot of difference between them? Not really. I mean, yeah, there's things, you got your preferences. Some people like this, some people like that, whatever. But for the most part, they're both fucking phones. They like they're the same size, more or less. They do the same shit. There's just, people have their preferences. So it's just competition. It's what capitalism does. And so if you think about it, if you're still thinking about it in terms of like they stole this or they ripped this off, then it's time to evolve your understanding, I think, if you want to be like a more mature and measured, rational comic book fan. So we're going to look at this list from CBR. 10 characters Marvel ripped off from DC, and 10 DC stole from Marvel. So they're doing it in their headline because, headlines have to be inflammatory, but that's really not that. A lot of cases, the writer, the creators of the two publishers were friends. They would hang out, they'd get beers and lunch and stuff together, and then go back to work at their respective publishers. And it wasn't like they're just gangs on the street where they're, you know what I mean? Like, oh, there's those fucking Marvel guys, let's kick their asses or something like that. You still there, Perp?
Yeah.
Oh, my bad. Well, before we go, I missed a bunch of chats, I think, so let's check them out. Yeah. Yeah,
Actually,
DC was.
I have to get going, Dane. Sorry, it's
right on.
It's 12 o'clock
Cool.
my time. But
all right, man.
Have fun. Oh, man, I'll probably see. Can you put the segment of this?
Yeah, I'll put it up for sure. Yes,
awesome.
during the week next week. Yep.
It was good chatting, and everyone in chat hit that like so we could get Dane into the algorithm as well. All right, peace out, everyone.
Later, man. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Yeah, DC technically was first. Of course, DC wasn't called DC. Marvel wasn't called Marvel. They both started printing comics more or less, new characters, new stories in comics in around the same year, 1939. That's when Batman, Superman, and Captain America all debuted in the same year. I believe Superman was first, then Batman shortly after, and then I think Captain America right around that time. I'd have to double check, but yeah, I mean, it's never been like it's never been a thing where it's like one came way first. It's like there's a lot of the same creative energy going around, because prior to Marvel and DC doing their original characters, and I talked about this in the videos that they're on this channel now. There's a Flash Gordon one and a Superman video that I did, kind of the history of the creation of these characters and their cultural impact and stuff about their creators. Before Flash Gordon, before Superman, the reason he's credited as the first comic book superhero is because before Superman, comic books were just reprinted newspaper comics, like fucking whatever the comics strips that you would find in your Sunday newspaper. It was just those recycled into a comic book format and sold on newsstands. Yeah. All right. So we'll check out a few of these real quick, and then I'm going to head off. But Marvel, Deadpool ripped off Deathstroke. This is a pretty commonly known one, at least among comics fans. Deadpool's creator might want you to think that the Merc with the Mouth didn't start out as a ripoff of the mega popular assassin Deathstroke that was introduced in 1980, but he was. And he's a mercenary whose first appearance is trying to kill a teenage super team, which is what Deathstroke was doing with Teen Titans. He's got a healing factor and uses lots of weapons, but his signature weapon is a sword. And very clearly some similar stylistic stuff. The pouches, the mask. DC ripped off the Wasp with Bumblebee. And, of course, ripped off, once again, this is a hyperbolic statement, and it's not like it was some sinister thing. And it's not like when DC did this, Marvel was like, oh, you motherfuckers, you stole. Because if it was actually stealing or ripping off, then Marvel could have sued them. But you can copyright the Wasp and her name, Janet Van Dyne, and stuff like that. But like, you can't copyright a woman in a costume of a winged insect, right? Like, that's not a copyrightable thing. The Nova Corps is let's just use the word inspired by, right? So essentially, it's like Marvel looked at what Green Lantern Corps was about, and they're like, what if we did our own? Like, what if it's basically flattery. Like somebody said earlier, it's like the highest form of flattery. And that's how these publishers see it amongst each other. They're not mad about it against, they're not like getting pissed off. They're like, oh, that Green Lantern concept is really cool. What if we did our own and did our own twist on it? And so you get the Nova Corps, which, in the comics has ended up very different than the Green Lantern Corps. The only thing, the base concept is the same. An intergalactic group of space cops, essentially, and they all draw their power from the same power source. And this is one that a lot of people are surprised to learn. I was surprised to learn it back when I wrote that article. Namor the Submariner came first, actually in 1939. He was actually the first Marvel character before Captain America. I'm not sure. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. But Aquaman came after. So you've got the King of Atlantis. He's, can do all kinds of cool shit. He's got all these powers. King of Atlantis, right? And then Aquaman. Same thing. Black Cat and Catwoman. Very clearly some inspiration going on there. And obviously Catwoman came first, and Black Cat was introduced later on in Spider-Man comics. Guardian ripped off Captain America, apparently. I don't know about that. Oh, Jack Kirby was unquestionably the king, but the king was not afraid of taking an idea he liked and doing a twist on it at another company. Exactly. So that's why when Jack Kirby stole from himself. When you look at, he was doing New Gods over at DC, and then he left DC, and he went over to Marvel, and he did the Eternals, because he liked that idea of these cosmic beings that were essentially gods, and they've been around forever, and so on and so forth, and they're tied into the history of the universe and reality and all that stuff. New Gods, Eternals, essentially could be more or less the same thing. It's a pretty obvious one. Darkseid, and then came along Thanos. Jim Starlin and Mike Friedrich introduced one of Marvel's iconic villains, Iron Man number 55, which I sold my copy of to Donnie Cates, by the way. He owns the copy that I used to own. 2 years after DC's Monarch Darkseid debut. The fact that they look so much alike is not a coincidence. Starlin had always planned for the villain to resemble one of Jack Kirby's infamous New Gods. But at first, he was aiming to make him resemble Metron. It wasn't until Marvel's editor-in-chief, Roy Thomas, got a look at the design that things started to change. Thomas outright explained to Starlin that if he was going to rip off the New Gods, then it might as well be the really good one. So like it was openly discussed that was what he was doing. And he was not stealing from Jack Kirby. He was inspired by Jack Kirby. Swamp Thing, I was not aware of this, came after Man Thing, apparently. Two, swamp guys, essentially. Very different power sets, I believe. But, you can see the resemblance clearly. Sentry, this one's not even controversial because it was kind of a wink thing. Whenever they created Sentry, it was like, we're doing Superman, but what if he had severe mental illness problems and had a really bad dark side and he, wasn't always in control of his powers? I mean, there's big S, big S. Rocket Red, who even knows who that is? Sometimes they don't become successful, right? Like, yeah, actually the New Gods were meant for Thor. Yeah, we saw that earlier, McLeod. We're watching the I Freaking Love Comic stream and saw that. Yeah, exactly, Brian. He was Deathpool was named Wade Wilson and Deathstroke is Slade Wilson. And I don't think it was parody, actually. I think it kind of became parody, but Rob Liefeld basically just stole the look, and it was pretty bad. That's true. Marvel started out as Timely Comics. And I've got the omnibus here. I plan to cover that pretty soon. Yeah. Timely Comics. That was the publisher that eventually became Marvel. Hawkeye, Green Arrow. I don't know. I don't see it. Do you guys see it? I don't see a resemblance. Do you? Let me know. Maybe I'm missing it. Yeah. Red Rocket. Let's see. Black Racer, ripped off of Silver Surfer. Jack Kirby was never afraid to create new characters. DC and Marvel alike are littered with his original ideas and creations, but he was also never afraid to reuse his own ideas. That's another thing. Before you go saying that some character was ripped off from another publisher, you might want to check that they weren't both created by the same dude or the king, as in this case. Bullseye was a ripoff of Deadshot. I did not know that. That's kind of interesting. Makes sense, though. Red Lion. I mean, yeah, I can see it. It's kind of... But he's also a newer character, I believe. And this is this controversial one. A lot of people don't know this. XMen was kind of inspired by Doom Patrol. A group of teens who are led by a old professor guy in a wheelchair. They all have their different powers. They're all kind of outcasts. And they come together to, fight bad guys. Now, if you watch the Doom Patrol show on HBO Max, it's been, more or less inspired by the Grant Morrison run, which did enough different with it to really distinguish it from X-Men. And sometimes you never know which one's gonna. Sometimes it's luck of the draw. X-Men just happened to resonate more with the public than Doom Patrol, at least at the time. So yeah, Imperator X, ripped off from Galactus. And yeah, he didn't. Galactus appeared in '66, but Imperator X didn't come along until 2000. So, Squadron Supreme, definitely highly inspired by the Justice League. Almost every character is directly inspired by the Justice League. Zatanna. And well, one thing about the Squadron Supreme, and like they did this with last year's event, Heroes Reborn, where it allows Marvel to play with the archetypes of the DC's Justice League, but do something different with them. So they can kind of take them and show them as more authoritarian, which they typically do, than the Avengers. And it's almost like a fun way that they can have the Avengers fight the Justice League without actually having them fight the Justice League and having to deal with all the licensing rights and all that. Zatanna came after Scarlet Witch. I did not know that till right now. Well, they say it's almost a stretch to call her a ripoff. Introduced the same year, Wanda arrived March '64. Zatanna appeared in November, so not even a full year. Thunderbolts, yep, Suicide Squad, a team of villains that are controlled by the government to, be heroes, to act as heroes. There's definitely some distinctions in the details, but more or less that's the same concept. And Commander Steel, ripped off from Captain America. That's kind of obvious. So, yeah, next time you see anybody claiming that, that Marvel stole this, DC stole that, or whatever, just remember that. A lot, and the key thing to remember is that all superheroes are based on archetypes. Superman he set the mold, right? I made a whole video about it. I said a bunch of flowery language about how cool it was that he was the first, he was the archetype that set the mold. Every other character that came after him was basically, you can look at it like a family tree. Superman is the trunk of the tree. And then Batman kind of branches off, and then Captain America kind of branches off into a branch, and that's just how it goes. So you're going to see some cross-pollination. You're going to see some inspiration back and forth. And I think it's a sign of a healthy industry. I think it's, as far as capitalism goes and corporations and so on, and how that can be a pretty fucking gross, exploitative game, a system in which to exist. I think that there is a little bright spot when it comes to Marvel and DC, and how for, almost a century, they've been playing off of each other in kind of a friendly competition. And sure, there's probably some hurt feelings here and there, back and forth or whatever, but like it's all for the same purpose. When it comes to comic books, rising tide raises all ships. If people are excited about going to the comic book store to watch Marvel, to buy Marvel comics, they're going to look at the DC comics too. If people are excited about what DC's doing in the movies or on TV, they're probably going to want to go, well, I wonder what Marvel's doing. And that's the symbiotic relationship that has existed between them for 80 plus years now. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think it's silly, arbitrary, short-sighted, and kind of toxic to ignore that beauty and ignore that symbiotic relationship, that essentially they need each other. I don't know that, it's probably safe to assume that if one of them had failed, the other one might have failed. You never know. In some alternate reality where Marvel did go bankrupt in the 90s and never came back, or they did go bankrupt, but if they never came back and they just had to stop printing comics, what would have happened to DC? I don't know. Maybe they would have become way more popular since they were all that's left, but maybe not.